Hey everyone, welcome back to this week's edition of WCM's Park Update Supplier Showcase. Today I am joined by Brad. I didn't ask your last name, but is it Doherty?
Yeah, nailed it. Very few get
Okay,
it right the first
awesome.
time, so
I,
congrats.
I was gonna say it looks a little bit simpler than it probably is. Brad is here joining us from TPx, and I'll let him talk a little bit about what they do. But before he does that, Brad, how did you get started working for the company, and what gets you excited working in the outdoor industry with campgrounds?
Yeah, great question. So I've been at TPX now actually 8 years this month, about a week ago. So been at TPX, formerly Telepacific, if that name sounds more familiar to everybody. For 8 years, I've been in the telecom industry for about 16 years. So what kind of really drove me to join TPX or Telepacific at the time was kind of their reach. I think was the biggest thing for me. Their ability to talk to multiple customers anywhere in the United States, so there wasn't any limitations as to who we could or could not help. And I think that's been a really good transition into me kind of working with or inside the RV park industry, campgrounds, national parks, because TPX, one of our very unique value adds is we can provide internet connectivity to anywhere in the country. Even parts of Alaska, which is a fun fact for everybody. So it
Oh
just
wow,
gives me.
that's a really remote spot too, so that's super
It
challenging.
is. Yeah, I mean, with our ability to have our partnerships with over 120, 130 plus carriers across the country, it gives me kind of the freedom and the ability to confidently go to any park owner or developer and say, whatever you're opening or whatever you're looking to do for this particular project, TPX has the ability to provide you with some kind of connectivity, whether it be broadband, fiber, even fixed wireless. So we have a lot of options at our disposal.
And I know you mentioned internet there, Brad, but talk a little bit more about some of the other services you guys provide. I know, as you discussed, it's communications, it might be IT, security related stuff. Sort of preview and just give us a really broad overview of some of the different solutions you guys are able to put in different types of businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. So, TPX, our foundation is telecommunications, right? So we started as a local voice telco in Southern California, which is where we're providing voice connectivity and internet circuits. And from 25 years ago, which is how long TPX has been around till now, we've vastly expanded our portfolio, which now includes IT managed services. So besides the telecommunications part, we are also an IT managed services provider. And what that consists of, as you touched base on a little bit, Alex, is we include cybersecurity solutions, whether that be managed backups, endpoints, Office 365. We now offer, as kind of around a couple of years ago now, cybersecurity assessments, whether it be gap
Mm.
assessments, pen testing, things of that nature. So, we've TPX has always been in the philosophy of kind of listening to what our customers are looking to do or whether it may be problems or areas that we could help with and kind of been early adopters to ensure that if we're going to provide, voice over IP as part of our portfolio set, we're going to be early on testing it and making sure that the iterations after that are going to be very strong, reliable, stable enough to have kind of the confidence for us as an organization to back behind it. So we do cover a lot of things, and I do believe that components of our portfolio fit very nicely in the RV park industry. And maybe not everything, but there are components of that we can definitely work with them on to ensure not only that they're connected to have their guests have a great experience, but also that they're secure from the outside world and the environment we live in today with the tax and all the other things. So
And that's what I was just going to bring up too, Brad, as you mentioned at the end. One of the biggest sort of things that we hear at Woodall's when it relates to this conversation around internet or security is park owners wanting to protect themselves, protect their
mhm.
guests who might be at their park, and really make sure that a solution that they're implementing is really easy to operate. And it sounds like you guys do that, assessing what the needs might be, going in and implementing that, and then working with the park through that process. Can you just talk about, what does that process typically look like for you when you're working with an RV park or a campground?
Yeah, and it's a great point. I mean, not only do you want to have the ability to protect your guests from a local level, but in their information, and if you're running point of sale systems where there's financial information, that all of that is very open and vulnerable to outside attacks. And what we've learned over, I would say, the last decade or so, kind of getting more into the IT managed services and the security side of things, is there's so many different avenues for an attack or somebody malicious to come in and either compromise their system, and then ransomware happens where they try and get money out of it. So we've learned that, what we initially do is if a park doesn't kind of know where their security stance is, we offer free assessments to let's take a look at what you currently have in place, or what you don't have in place. Are there gaps? Are there vulnerabilities? And that kind of gives them kind of a first glance as to, okay, well, I've been focusing so much on security from my email standpoint, so my employees don't click on malicious emails, free Starbucks, free Home Depot, blah blah blah. But let's look at the rest of it too, where there may be some holes that we can fill. And from that report, we can then kind of structure what makes the most sense to do, like mission critical. That's very high priority. It's bright red on this report and for a color graph. Or is it a lower priority where you should do this now, but is it going to compromise your revenue coming in or your guest security information? Maybe not. So that's where we've been able to kind of take a much more consultative approach, because none of this is cookie cutter. None of this is plug and play. It's always going to be case by case basis. And we want to make sure that whatever we're going to potentially provide as a solution to their problem, it's going to better fit and be custom tailored to their needs. And that's where we've been very successful with a lot of our clients that have been able to use our expertise in that aspect.
Brad, as you're running those reports and you're creating these customized solutions, what would you say is like the number one thing that a lot of parks are overlooking, or that they're really just not paying attention to when you go in and do this? There's probably something out there that it's just like, we just don't think about it enough, but the potential for harm back to my business is actually really large, that it could have a sizable impact. So what does that look like for you?
Yeah, and that's also a really good question, because when you think of cybersecurity, you always think of, okay, servers, endpoints, like devices on the
That's right.
network, guests, or internally with a certain park. But in reality, what we've seen is the highest percentage or numbers of attacks, or how malicious characters were able to get into certain servers on these premises or properties, was human error. And it's not really human
Mm.
error; it's more psychology. Is like, and it's funny, when I first started at TPX, there would be links that I would click on that would look legitimate, or that looked like there was something related to an internal email from a different department, or from an outside vendor who I've known, that I would not even think twice about it being malicious or an attack. So that level of, it's called security awareness training, is a really big thing that, ironically, it's actually the most cost effective component of the entire cybersecurity space, but it has the biggest impact, because what that security awareness training is doing, it's retraining your users. And even if you give access to your guests, it's kind of retraining all of how you approach, or make sure you question what an email may or may not be legitimate or not. And by doing that, we have reports that kind of show and track the decrease, or the decrease of what the malicious attacks could be. And these are simple campaigns that we run. It runs a couple times a month. And again, it's the most cost effective way of doing it. But by retraining that behavior, that's what will eliminate, or potentially not allow in, a suspicious character to potentially compromise your network. So, it's not spending thousands of dollars on upgraded firewalls or servers, or, backups to ensure, like, those are all absolutely crucial components. But the smallest and most ineffective, or the most cost effective one, typically we've seen has the highest impact. So it's kind of interesting seeing that over the last couple of years.
Yeah, exactly. What's the typical park that you guys are usually working with if somebody is reaching out? And do you provide more of that, hands-off solution like I talked about, where you run the report, you find the customized solution, you go in, show everybody what to do. Hey, here's what we're going to implement here so it can impact. And I know a lot of people being in season, or even as we start to think about preparing for the off season, or if
Mm-hmm.
somebody's ran into an issue and it's like, okay, sometimes running into a challenge is sort of the wake up call to say, man, we really need to do something about this to prepare so that it doesn't happen again. What does that look like as far as the typical park and the typical solution that you're working with when you approach one of these campgrounds?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, the great thing about TPX is I have the ability to really not turn anybody away, which is, I've been in telecom for so long, and certain industries or companies I work for are very kind of pigeonholed, or you're very specific of, you can stay in these lanes, don't go outside, and you'll be fine. Where at TPX, it can be a park as small as 10 to 15 RV slots, as large as a couple
Mm-hmm.
thousand. Like, I'm not limited to the size of the actual property itself. So I can have conversations with anybody and everybody in the industry to at least, I may not be the best fit for everybody, but I can at least give them guidance as to, what I see kind of at first glance. And this is the path you should go down, whether it's with TPX or not. I can at least give them a lot of guidance as to where they could potentially go. And that, again, that's been a great freedom of mind that I've been able to do, not just be able to talk nationwide, but to talk to anybody and everybody. So it makes it better for me because I'm not limited or blinded by who I can actually talk to. So
I
been
get
good.
it. It's more enjoyable, and that's one of the things we love too, is being able to
Yeah.
cover a bunch of different parks and things as well. It just makes the experience that much better, where you feel like you can go in, put that personalized solution in place, and be able to help them no matter what stage of the game they're at in their business.
Yeah, totally.
Brad, as we wrap up, where can people go to reach out if they want to learn more? Maybe sit down, have a call, email you, and get their questions answered.
Sure. Yeah. So we do have a website, www.tpx.com. That gives you, as I mentioned, our portfolio is pretty vast, so it gives you a great amount of resources when it comes to just the solutions we offer, case studies, different testimonials, white papers, so on and so forth. You can reach out to me directly. My email is bdoherty@tpx.com, or my cell phone, which is my lifeline for anybody and everybody to get a hold of me. It's 650-219-4034. I'm pretty good at getting back to people right away. I want to make sure if it is something, and whether it's a small issue or a large one, I want to make sure I'm at least responsible and communicative enough to get back in touch with them as much as I can. So I appreciate any and all calls, and looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, exactly. And for the listeners, we will have the website for TPX linked below, so you can just click on that and be able to get that information directly. Brad, thanks again for being here.
Alex, appreciate you having me. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to WCM's Supplier Showcase. As a reminder, this show is available as a podcast where you can listen to the episode, or if you want to get the video, you can look at the recording on Facebook and YouTube. All right, guys, we will see you back here next week for another great conversation. Thanks, and we'll talk to you soon.